Now I'm going to discuss the topic of evolution. So in evolution, I'm going to start with general evolution. So general evolution is commonly known as evolution by natural selection. So the reason they call it evolution by natural selection, it is because of they use the idea of Charles Darwin, the father of evolution. That's why they call it evolution by natural selection. So now I'm going to try and discuss the theories of development. So these theories of development, they were made so that they can explain to us how the process of evolution is able to take place. So it's like they are the origins of the ideas of origins. So it's like they try to explain to us when was humans or species originated. So first of all, it is important for us to explain what is evolution. Evolution. So evolution is the process whereby organisms evolve over time. So the way evolve is to change. So it means over time, or as time goes on, the organisms start to change. So that thing, when organisms start to change, we call it evolution. So this process takes place gradually. So gradually means slowly. So that's it. So in this thing, or let me say, I'm going to try to discuss the theories that were developed by various scientists or different scientists who tried to explain the process of evolution. They try to explain how organisms are able to change. So I'm going to discuss 3 theories. So we have many theories that were developed to try to explain this evolution. So now I'm going to discuss only 3. So we call them the theories of development. Theories of development. So origins of ideas about origins. So I'm going to discuss 3 of them. 3 theories of development. So the first one that I'm going to start with is Lamarckism. So I'm going to start with Lamarckism. So this theory was developed by a scientist called Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck. So Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck came up with a particular theory or a hypothesis to try to explain evolution. So it was developed by Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck. That's why they call it Lamarckism. So Lamarck tried to explain evolution using two laws. He developed two laws that tried to explain how evolution is able to take place. So the first law was the law of use and disuse. And then the second law was the law of inheritance of acquired characteristics. So these are the laws that Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck used when he was explaining the process of evolution. So in this law of use and disuse, he said, or he argued that when an organism uses a part frequently, that part starts to develop. It starts to develop until it becomes stronger. And then he also said that if that organism doesn't use that particular part frequently, that part starts to become smaller and smaller until it disappeared. That's why he said it is the law of disuse. So for example, he said that if a person starts to lift when they try to build their muscles. So if that person uses those metals that they use to build their muscles, if that person uses them frequently, their body is going to develop until it becomes bigger. But if that person doesn't use those metals, their body is going to become smaller and smaller until it disappears. That's how he tried to explain evolution in the law of use and disuse. And then when we touch on the law of inheritance of acquired characteristic, and then he said that that particular characteristic that was developed during the life cycle of an organism is able to be passed on to the offsprings. So like I said, the example that I used to explain this law of use and disuse, when I use that example in this law, for example, then I start to lift and then my muscles start to become bigger. Then when I have kids, my kids are going to come with those muscles. That's what he said in this law. It means my kids have inherited that particular characteristic. That's what he tried to say. So the law of use and disuse in this law of use and disuse, he said when an organism uses a part of its body frequently, that particular have starts to develop, but when an organism doesn't use it, it becomes smaller and smaller until it disappears. So he said, this is called law of use and disuse. And then in the law of inheritance of acquired characteristics, he said the characteristics developed during the life cycle of an organism are able to be passed down to offsprings. So these are the two laws. So the common example that is used is that one of giraffes, whereby they try to explain how the giraffes were able to have long necks. So when they explained them, they said that during the life cycle of giraffes had short necks, but then they started to feed on tall trees. So because of they were unable to reach the food or the leaves that were on the top of the plant, they started to stretch their neck frequently. So this is the law of use and disuse. They started to stretch their necks frequently. As a result, they become taller because of they were used frequently. And then after that, after the giraffes gained those long necks, they started to pass those characteristics of long necks to their offsprings. As a result, all giraffes started to have long necks. So that's how you apply it on real life examples. Even in snakes, you can apply it in snakes. Why snakes started to lose their legs? You can apply it there also. So another theory of development that I'm going to discuss is Darwinism. So this one was developed by Charles Darwin. So it was developed by Charles Darwin. So Charles Darwin tried to explain evolution by natural selection. So the works of Charles Darwin have influenced molecular biology in many ways, but I'm not going to discuss them here. So Charles Darwin is the father of evolution. We call him the father of evolution because he was the first person to come up with the theory of evolution by natural selection. And then his theory made sense until to this day, it still makes sense. That's why we call him the father of evolution. So, in his theory, Charles Darwin was traveling in a voyage. He was traveling in a voyage using a ship that we call HMS Beagle. So he was observing different organisms, especially the Galapagos finches. He explained, like he tried to observe them and try to look why they are different. He tried to observe the variations that existed among those finches. So then we noticed that organisms produce a large number of offsprings. But not all of these offsprings survive. So it is that organisms, they produce large number of offsprings, but they do not all survive. And then he wondered why they do not survive. And then he noticed that there is a great deal of variation among these offsprings. So then what was those variations? Like variations is the differences that exist among that population. So then he noticed that some of them have favorable traits or characteristics, while some do not have these favorable characteristics. So it means the favorable characteristics or traits are those traits that enable them to survive. For example, if we go to the queue, when we go to the queue, maybe we want to fetch food in the school, we'll find that we have those big guys with muscles. Then when we are in a queue, they start to overcompete us, or like, yeah, if I may put it, like they start to have advantage over us, the slenders. So those guys, we say they have favorable characteristics because when they get into the queue, they can just push you to the side and then you just fall there because of they have favorable traits. So even in the offsprings, there were some favorable traits that were possessed there. So when there is a change in environmental conditions, those with favorable traits or characteristics are able to survive. And then those without these favorable traits, they are unable to survive because they don't have the traits that enable them to survive. So sometimes it's not only the changing environmental conditions, but sometimes a competition might arise. So when there's a competition, maybe for a mate, maybe competition for a mate or a competition for food, those with favorable characteristics, they are going to win because of they are strong to be able to outcompete those ones with unfavorable traits. Okay, so when there's a change in environmental conditions, those with favorable traits are able to survive. And then when they survive, so the survivors, they produce and pass the allele for favorable traits to their offsprings. And then the whole population starts to have those favorable traits. So that's how to explain the theory of Charles Darwin bilateral selection. So it means the nature, it is the force that is going to select which organisms are able to survive depending on their characteristics, if they are favorable or unfavorable. So now I'm going to discuss the last theory of development, which is punctuated equilibrium. Punctuated equilibrium. So this one was proposed by two scientists, biologists. So this scientist or biologist was Stephen J. Gould and NTLAMZ'S. So Stephen J. Gould and NTLAMZ'S, they were biologists. So they explain the speed at which evolution takes place. So they are concerned about the speed or the rate at which this process of evolution takes place. So their theory was also based on natural selection. But according to them, evolution is not gradual, the way Darwin said. They say evolution is not gradual. So they say evolution takes long periods of time whereby species don't change or they change a little. So these periods whereby the species they don't change, like they are long periods of time, like we have many years whereby when we look at the species, they don't change at all. This is according to them. So these long periods of time where species don't change at all, we call them equilibrium. And then they said that when we are still busy looking at these long periods of time, suddenly these alternate or become disturbed, alternate with short periods of time whereby species change rapidly or faster. So these short periods of time, we call them punctuation. So what they try to say is that while we are still busy looking at those long periods of time, wherever we notice that no man, our species are not changing, then while we are still busy looking at that, then the species they start to change faster, rapidly. They form new species rapidly. That's why they call it punctuation. To punctuate is to make things to change faster. That's why they call it punctuation. And then they said that their theory was supported by the absence of transitional fossils in the fossil record. So the fossil record is where we record which species were found by our paleontologists. Paleontologists are scientists who study the fossils, obviously. So in our fossil record, we don't have transitional fossil. A transitional fossil is a type of fossil that have both the characteristic of an old organism and those ones of the present organism. So this is a transitional fossil. Even if we go to grade 10, in grade 10 we did this type of bed that we call Archaeopteryx. So our Archaeopteryx, we found that it was a transitional fossil because it had both the characteristics of dinosaurs, and dinosaurs were like old species, and then it had the characteristics of dinosaurs and the characteristics of